fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is in the house.
I'm in the house because it's really miserable outside. Cold and rainy. Bring me summer, please, anytime. I'll take it.
Wow. Hey, you got that cold? Yeah, I heard it was going to be colder than normal. So I guess that cuts the smoking short, hey? You don't.
I have not been outside. Today's about the first day. I can smoke in the sleety snow, but I don't want to. But it's just takes the fun out of it. You know, I just can't sit there and watch the smoke billow out of it and have a beverage. But
yeah.
Read a good book like Don's. That's what I would do.
Well, you see, but then you're going to end up burning your smoker, right? If you're reading that book, you won't.
I'll be so it's true. I'll be so into it.
Yeah.
I'll be in the tunnel of the tunnel. I'll never get out of it.
The meat will burn. There'll be nothing left. It'll just be smoke, and then I hope you like it well done. So
I know. I like it anyway. That's not true.
Yeah, get it like it almost anyway. So
I'll leave it alone. I'll leave that alone.
Yeah, that's the way. Yeah. Okay, so listen, we've got Don Sawyer here, and he's written book 2, Soul Catcher book 2, and it's in the series. So it's the Tunnels of Buda. So thank you for being here, Don.
Oh gosh, Alan, thanks for having me again. I really enjoyed our interview, and I want to sympathize with Joe, by the way. One of the things I love doing is sitting on my front porch and smoking my pipe. Somebody said you can't be angry when you're smoking a pipe, and I think there's some truth to that. But it's been so damn cold here too. I haven't been able to get out, and my wife, would throw me out physically if I tried to smoke inside. So I'm relegated to the front porch, and it's been too cold. So I may be a little angry. You'll understand, right?
We're cranky, Al.
Cranky.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm cranky. We're all cranky today. So this is the cranky show. Well, so listen, you've got into book 2 here now. So now for the listeners that haven't read the first one and don't know what this is, let's talk about the series Soul Catcher.
Yeah.
What is that series about? Okay.
The term soul catcher is derived from a resistance of Aboriginal people, both in other, Africa, but in particular in North America. When Curtis and some of the other photographers of that late 19th century went around the country trying to document the people and cultures of America, sadly, before they faded away. And many of the Native people balked at having their picture taken. And they felt that these cameras captured a portion of their soul. And so they didn't, it was never clear to me from what I've read if they felt that a piece of the soul was actually inside the camera, or if it simply extracted it and they were unable to retrieve it. But I know one thing that, when you look at a picture, and I've just been looking at some pictures of my daughter when she was swimming, and she was like about, 14 or 15. And here I am, looking a hell of a lot younger and being a lot younger than I am now. And that picture, in a way, is that captured a bit of my soul. I mean, there I was, frozen in that photograph, never to be the same. I aged, the picture doesn't. So in a way, it did capture a bit of my soul. And I can kind of understand that. But in looking at that concept and being fascinated by it, I thought, well, what if there really was a machine of some sort that captured a portion of your soul? And instead of capturing it on paper, actually encapsulated it and crystallized it into a gem, into a jewel. And that this jewel then sort of acted as a kind of accelerator of your powers. And then, of course, as is often the case, no technology is good or evil, but it's how it's used. And this one's being used by a cabal, as we find out later, a cabal of an ancient order whose function is to sow dissent and discord among people forever, to keep them from coming together as a single human tribe. And so it's being these gym makers, one of which is Zoltan, who's one of the main characters, are functionaries for this for the Mester, who is the coordinator of this particular program. So these guys are making gyms for people all over the world who we might call influencers. And the influencers have these magnificent gyms, which have a great deal of power in themselves, although they don't know that. And what it does, as I say, is just exacerbate the characteristics they already have. And since they're carefully selected, they're selected for their ruthlessness, their greediness, their selfishness. And so it enhances and influences this in terms of a sort of social norm. Well, of course, none of this is understood by the gym makers themselves. They just know that they've been hired to do this weird job. And all of them they're all orphans, they're all widows, they're all people with no family, they're all on the edge of suicide when they're hired. And so they have nothing to lose. But they also don't understand that they're being caught up in this terrible web of evil. So the whole thing changes in the first book when Zoltan makes a gym for a woman, which is unusual because Mester doesn't like working with men and they're too independent. And against her husband's wishes. And she's sort of in this desperately empty marriage in this sort of desperately empty suburb of New York. And so he just sort of shows up on her doorstep. And oddly, instead of sort of telling him, to bugger off, because he looks kind of like, if you remember what a Fuller Brush salesman used to look like, he's got this little satchel. And he says, for $40,000, I'll make you this special gem. And she does it. And so that book opens with the process of the gem maker actually extracting from her soul, from her body, a portion, and then watching as it's manufactured in this machine, which looks kind of like an old wooden box camera. And then out comes this absolutely staggeringly beautiful gem. And of course, she's in that gem. And so when she of course doesn't understand the full implications, but she does know that she's desperate to get out of this situation. And so she begs him to give her, how can I find a chain that will never break, that will keep this stone with me forever? That she's just immediately understood. This is a part of me that I can never be separated from. Literally, it's my soul. So after a long series, he finally gives her this very cryptic note about how to find him. And so then he disappears. And so she's still left with this philandering lawyer husband whose specialty is money laundering. And so she decides that the only thing she can do is to break out of this situation. And of course, this gem is now kind of it kind of lit this fire now. It's given her agency that she'd forgotten she had. But as she looks at this note, it's impossible to figure out because the clues are, first of all, even once she figures them out, and that's pretty hard. It takes her to a subway station that's been closed since 1934. And it takes her to as she reads it, it takes her to a subway station that's been closed since the war. So what's going on? So anyway, make a long story short, which you'll enjoy reading, but she makes her way through the tunnels of, in this case, the New York subway, and finally finds Zoltan. And of course, he is locked in this life of quiet desperation. Because part of this contract forbids him to touch another person, to divulge his real name, to have any contact with other people. So he lives this kind of luxurious life because he's well paid, but completely alone and empty. But she sort of literally barges into his life and convinces him that he must, come out of this trance, if you will. and find out what's going on. And that's how it starts. All right, let's stop there for now. That's kind of the beginning of the first book.
Do you know, these characters are very specific, like there's a lot of detail to them. How do you accomplish writing these characters because they are so detailed like that? Do you actually live out scenes as characters in your head, or how does it work for you?
Really interesting question. This is the first time I've done this, but I actually wrote character sketches for at least 4 or 5 of the main characters, and these are where I just knocked out who this person was, where he came from, what his parents were, what his traumas were, what issues she was facing, what conflicts, what drove her, and maybe a page and a half, and then I knew this person. I knew her voice. I knew his. I had a sense of the depth of his depression, of his desperation, and so even though most of that didn't get into the book, I actually knew these characters and how they would respond to a particular situation. Like in Zoltan's case, the ambivalence. I mean, sure, he was living this awful, lonely life, but it was a life he knew, and it was safe. And all of a sudden, he's faced with this incredible woman with all of this energy and drive who isn't going to let him live that life anymore. So it's not like he says, oh, well, gee, that's a really good idea. Let's go find out who's doing this and kill him. There's a whole lot of, as you can imagine, he's wrought with all kinds of, racked with all kinds of uncertainties. And so having those characters in my head really allowed me, I think, it's a good point. Sometimes you read a book, and after a while, you can't figure out one character from the other. Who said that, and who are they, and why are they saying that? I really do pride myself in developing characters with a distinctive voice, a distinctive personality, who have a backstory that you may not understand fully, but you understand it's there. So yeah, that's one of the ways I approach it.
I'm going to ask you sort of because your explanation and the books that you write, and I write a different genre, but most writers have something in common, which is we're storytellers. We have some sort of imagination. But to write your books, you have to have an imagination. Because I can write myself into my own world and make a character, and I know what I write. Write what you know about, right? But there's nothing in your books that you know about, right?
Yeah.
So so tell me about imagination in your process of writing. Where does it come from?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and that whole idea of write what you know about. Well, ultimately, though, I think every character you write, no matter, whether he's an alien from some other galaxy or not, you know that person somehow. You've met some parts of that person somewhere. I mean, you're bringing it out of some experience you've had. And so the imagination is still drawing on your experience. But of course, imagination comes from the word image. So you actually create, and I do tend to write from a visionary point of view. I don't mean that necessarily in a progressive visionary way, but in terms of, I literally see things like the center of this of his world and her world, as it turns out, is the market. And I had this. It's world building, really. And so, believe it or not, there really was an abandoned subway in New York. It was abandoned in the 1870s. And there really was a terminal. But in my book, this terminal is massive. It's bigger than Grand Central Station. And it was abandoned and forgotten. And then these sort of refugees from a world that's harsh and unaccepting and rigid find refuge in this place and transform it into this almost utopian society with people from all over the world. But they all share something special. They have special skills, special knowledge, special magic, if you will. And so I actually had an image of this massive dome, tiled in black and white tile, with a nuclear sun in the middle, and this just, I could see it. and I could see the booze, and I could hear the noises. And of course, you know, when you put yourself there, you're going to hear a dog barking over here, and somebody's going to have a bagpipe over there. So it's for me, it's a matter of creating this world in my head and in living in it. And so in this book, by the way, the second book, The Tunnels of Buda, I hope not too predictably, I've created a counter world to this, and it's deep under the castle of Buda. And this is the center, not of the sort of utopian syndicalist society of the market, but of this evil cabal. And it's this massive cube with hundreds of people there working to generate this propaganda, which is designed to keep us divided and helpless. And that, of course, has all of I put myself in that, you know, with this, you know, stainless steel walls and the sharp edges. And so again, I was able to create that and then live in it. And so I think that's part of the fun of writing. Certainly part of the fun of writing for me is to create these worlds and then inhabit them. And then once you do that, stuff kind of falls into place. And I had a lot of fun with this because it's not what I've written in the past. I don't know if you've seen my other books. I've written young adult fiction and adult nonfiction and kids books. So this was definitely a departure, but it was a fun departure, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, let's go with that. So you create these worlds,
Yeah.
And your worlds sound pretty complex. Do you know the world that you're going into as you're writing it, or does the world evolve as you're writing it?
Well, both. I mean, particularly the market is, you know, I have certain values. We all do. I think as a writer, those values and beliefs either intrude or inform, depending on how you look at it, our writing. And so in this case, I wanted to create a world that, if you will, using the term, and that, you know, it's been around for a while, like a cooperative, but an anarcho-syndicalist kind of society with hundreds of people from all over the world, all different cultures, who've come together and have found not only a way to live together, but a way to thrive and to create a society that doesn't require autocratic direction, but is truly democratic in the sense that the people who live and work there are the ones who decide on the policies and so forth and so on. And so this is kind of a ideal utopian dream that I've had for a long time. You know, we can, you know, just for starters, we can, you know, look at the cooperative in the Basque region, which has been around since the 50s, with 20,000 people that are in it, and it's worked magnificently. So this is an idea, kind of a utopian vision I've had, but I hadn't actually created the world to house it. So this was an opportunity to take some of those attitudes and values and put them in a dome, if you will. And of course, you know, also because of the nature of the story, which is, as you know, urban fiction, I wanted these people to be real, and I wanted the place to be real, and I wanted people to see there's another way of being in the world, and this place is another way of being in the world, and a lot of these people are very odd, and a lot of these people seem to be almost like shapeshifters, and they bring out kind of a magic there, and they're not accepted in that outer world because it's so concretized, it's so absolute, it's so unaccepting of differences. So they've come together, you know, and again from all over the world. Not, you know, the divisions that make us all weaker, in my opinion, have been abandoned in the interest of some common desire to be together and all benefit from that commonality and that common desire to make a society work for everyone. So that was, you know, so you get these kind of values and attitudes that you're dragging around for your life, and then here's an opportunity to actually try them out in action. I mean, Ursula Le Guin, I don't know if you know her, the science fiction writer, she does it beautifully, magnificently, every time. creating societies that make us look at ourselves, which is really the point. And I think that's kind of what I'm hoping to do here, is that people can say, hey, that's an interesting idea. And so, that's kind of, I guess that's kind of where those ideas, those worlds come from. And that belief, I'll just say this out, because it seems to me right now, we're facing literally existential challenges as a species, not as individuals, that too, possibly, but as a species. While the circus is in town, the environment is melting around us, right? And so, but is this the best we can do as a species, is to fall back on these ancient tribal divisions at a time when we need to find what we have in common instead of what divides us? It seems like we're actually retreating more and more into small groups that we're comfortable with, and that insulate us from the other. And so the other is becoming more and more hated. And so who benefits from that? It's those people who don't want to see a leveling. The levelers were a movement in 17th century England that were part of the British Civil War, who really wanted to create a utopian society in England. That's what they thought the Civil War was going to be. We're going to throw the monarch over, and then people are going to come together, redistribute land, and of course, it didn't take long for Cromwell to crush them. Hey, man, that's not what I had in mind. So yeah, it is to me about saying something about who we are and what we could be. But hopefully, but not in a preachy way. I don't want to be pedantic. So to create a story where these values are played out in exciting conflicts. And in the first book, you might remember that the one guy who had been an ex-agent, he actually gave Zoltan some information that was leading them to where the Mester was and who he was. And of course, he turns up not only dead the next morning, but with his hands cut off and his head cut off, so nobody who could identify what he is. So this is serious stuff. And so they're up against about as evil a force as you can imagine. So these two people in this interesting society are up against it. So it's been and again, I think it's a good read. I really do. I really think it's an exciting read. I think it's fun. I think it moves fast. I think there's some interesting plot twists. There's some romance.
What's your standard for magic? Or do you take what's are you taking what's already out there? Or are you kind of do you have your own rules?
I think that's a really, really good question. The whole idea of urban fantasy is, that it's like the magic doesn't become so absurd that it disconnects from a possible reality. And so I think that one of the things I've done in both books, and let me tell you, man, we're living in a time of magic. My God. You think about it. I have no idea how this is happening. I have no idea how I'm talking to you. And this is, I don't know where you guys are in LA. And I have no idea how that works.
It's all a dream. We're not real.
Yeah. Let's not go there. But it's like, there is a time of magic. The other day I was looking at a Future Shop paper or something. And as I was looking, I realized that probably 90% of what was being advertised there hadn't even been invented when I was a kid, much less actually been up for sale. Our whole lives are really filled with magic. But in this particular sense, when Barbara goes into the market for the first time and marvels at this astounding structure, and she says, well, who are these people? And he says, well, have you ever, he's trying to explain this. And finally he says, have you ever seen a contortionist? And she says, yeah, of course, it's incredible what they do. And he said, can you do that? And she said, no. She said, well, there are people who can do other things who, are equally extraordinary. But maybe they don't understand them. But it's a magic that they have that either isn't fulfilled or understood, or maybe hidden, because of it's not acceptable in the larger society. I worked in Africa for many years. And when you were there, like I went to do a seance with a shaman and other things, you realize this is an alternate reality. There's stuff going on there I don't understand. And I'm not, there's a belief in magic and what they call juju, which is bad magic. In fact, when we went through this session with one of the shamans, and he went into a trance, and he had some really interesting things to say. But he was talking to my friend who said, there's someone who's blocking your path. He said, now don't worry about it. It's not juju. It's not juju. It's not bad evil. And he was absolutely serious, and I'm thinking, man, I wouldn't want juju toward me. I'll tell you, it's like, who knows? Who knows? What's possible? Who knows out there? And so a lot of what I'm doing in these books is the magic has a logical base. Like the idea, I did a lot of research into wave science, which I knew very little about. It's incredible. The sending of sound through the through the air, through waves, the transmission of messages over thousands of miles. It's magic, and you take it to another extreme, and then it becomes my magic. But it has to stay in the realm of some sort of theoretical possibility. Like when the chain is made for Barbara's gym. It's a special, obviously, in the market, a special metallurgist and jeweler. And she's making it out of these metals, real metals. I mean, they're real. They're really on the periodic chart, that are so hard that they can't possibly, there's nothing that can possibly break them. So I looked into it and found out what these metals were. Now, whether they could actually be made into a chain, I don't know. But it was fun to see that there are these metals that we've never heard of, that are so dense in terms of their atomic construction that they would be absolutely unbreakable. So that kind of thing, it's magic, yeah, but it's within a certain realistic possibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, what are you hoping the reader takes away from this book, or this series even?
Well, I think first, honestly, this sounds kind of ridiculous and obvious, but I think first of all, I hope people come away with saying, wow, that was a good read. I mean that because I think that's the mark of a good writer. That people say, I enjoyed reading that, and I'm going to recommend it to my friend. But at the same time, and I don't want to get specific, but some of the urban fantasy writers I find just kind of, they just kind of do a high fantasy with a vague overlay on some contemporary situation. But there's nothing that really relates directly to who we are and where we are. And I hope people will come away thinking a bit about what is restraining us as a species, what's keeping us back from finding ways of combining our energies, our ideas, our concepts to solve the problems that we face as a species, and what is it that's keeping us from it? What is it that we're hearing? What is it that's turning us against each other? And in my case, I'm suggesting that this is more than just anthropological, evolutionary distrust of people who aren't like us. I'm suggesting that there's a conscious effort, a cabal, if you will, an evil force that works hard and relentlessly to keep us from seeing our commonalities and emphasize our differences. And I hope at some conscious or unconscious level, people will come away with that and thinking, geez, yeah, we've really got a lot more in common that keeps us apart. Maybe we should start thinking about how we can work together instead of separately. That may sound a little corny, but I guess that's what I hope people take away.
Hey, Don, quick question. You have these great big worlds, but your books really are based upon the individual and the characteristics of the individuals inside that world. As you're writing, how much do you think about the reader and the individuals who are going to experience your world?
I've done a lot of writing in the young adult field. I've got a couple of YA books that have worked out pretty well. And I've also done books specifically for adults with low reading levels. And of course, I've also done children's books. That's just kind of a long way of saying that I think if you're not keeping your audience in mind when you write, it's unlikely you're going to be very successful. So in these particular books, I have a reader in mind who is, who I think who would read other fantasy books and find them mentally and intellectually challenging, but also entertaining. So yeah, I've got that person in mind, and I'm thinking, no, not true. I'm not really thinking it, but I think in the back of my mind, I'm thinking now, is this too much? Is this going to get boring? Is the reader going to, is this too far fetched? Do I need to, to cut some of this so it's not so tedious? So I'm thinking of the reader, but I don't know that I have a specific reader in mind as much as I just want it to be an enjoyable read, a thoughtful read, one that someone could pick up and say, hey, this looks interesting, and after the first 10 pages, not put it down and say, wow, that's disappointing. I want them to read it and get involved, engaged, think about it, and say, hey, man, I want to see what's happening next. So it's the one thing I do tend to do, is that because I've written all this YA stuff, one thing about young adult work is that, you don't want to slow the narrative down with a whole bunch of kind of description and reflections and ruminating. So I tend to write a lot of dialogue. And I think that appeals to a lot of readers. I don't mean just young people. I think, it moves the story along, and it allows the characters to emerge through their voice and their actions. And so I'm thinking about in those terms, Elmore Leonard, the mystery writer, that he writes almost entirely in dialogue. There's just little scraps. He writes almost like a movie script. I do more description than that, but those are books that you read and you just get propelled into the story. And I mean, literally propelled. There's no time to sit back and reflect. You're just, you're there. And I try to capture some of that immediacy, I think.
Let's talk about how people find you. Now, do you have a website set up? Do you have social media? Where do people find Don?
Yeah, and I say this advisedly because, I really enjoy my publishers. And of course you can go to their, Castlebridge Media. These books can be ordered from your local bookstore. If somebody said your favorite online bookseller. I have a personal book website that's simply donsawyer.org. And I am learning. I have also a Facebook page, which is Don Sawyer Books. And I am finally, I think, have an Instagram. I'm not very good at this sort of thing, but I have a woman working with me who's a lot younger than I am, and who's, helping me to get a more of a social presence. Because you guys know, book selling these days is very, very difficult. It was last year, almost 4 million books were published in English, and 2/3 of those were self-published. So it's a very difficult. This is coming out from a press, but a small indie press that doesn't have thousands and thousands of dollars to get your book reviewed. And so having interviews like this, Alan, mean an awful lot to us. They really do. But then, of course, you've got to find a way of getting interviews like this in front of potential readers. And that's partly my job, and my publisher's job. So, yeah, I've got my Facebook page. I've got my Instagram. I've got my website, and I think anybody who's interested go to any of those and get all the information that they want.
Fantastic. Of course, we'll put that up on our website so people can find it easily. Wow, what can we say? I really appreciate you being here. And and the book, The Tunnels of Buda, Soul Catcher, Book 2, Don Sawyer. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Both you guys enjoyed it.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.